Welcome back everyone, it's Mags, and I used to think that Neptunia had no less than 7 mainline games thanks to this confusing title, Megadimension Neptunia VII. In reality, this is Neptunia IV. The VII is actually read as V2, as in Victory 2, since it's a direct sequel to Neptunia Victory, the third mainline game. Except that in and of itself was a sequel to Mark II, and you know, I don't see that game getting its flowers. If they had wanted to actually add some logical numbering, they'd have called this game, I don't know, Mark IV. But the VII is actually a bit sneaky because it can also refer to the fact that you could technically consider this the 7th Neptunia in 2 different ways. If you count each version of the mainline game separately, all 3 of which had 1 remake by that point, that would make 6 predecessors, making this kind of Neptunia 7. Or if you didn't do that but instead counted the spin-offs, of which there are 3 mainlines and 3 spin-offs also make 6 predecessors, kind of making this Neptunia 7. This was also the last mainline Neptunia for quite a while. There had not been a mainline game for over 10 years, excluding remakes. But just over the last couple of years, CompileHeart has been teasing a 5th mainline that they've been working on, and we now finally know that it's going to come out in Japan in August 2026. So if I say that V2 was the last mainline game now, that will have aged like milk almost immediately. I'll be honest, this is one of the ones I've been most looking forward to because it seems to be by far one of the most highly regarded ones. I had heard almost nothing but universally good things about it from fans, so I couldn't help but be at least a little excited going in. Before this entry, Neptunia had made its home on the PS Vita. Before that, the PS3, which is what the original versions of the first 3 mainline games were on. But the remakes of those, which are the Rebirth games, as well as all the spin-offs, lived on the Vita. That was Neptunia's console for a time. But then the PS4 released, the next generation of consoles, a noticeable step up from the PS3, and so naturally Neptunia's next big mainline game moved away from the Vita and onto the PS4. Megadimension Neptunia V2 was released in 2015 in Japan, 2016 in English, and then got a worldwide release on PC later in 2016, and eventually made it to Switch in 2020. I personally played it on PC. That's not the end of V2's history though, because despite already being a next-gen game, they decided to release an entire remake only a couple of years later, called V2R, also for the PS4 in 2017 in Japan, 2018 in English, and a worldwide release for PC later in 2018. That's like even the same exact release schedule as V2, just shifted a couple years, that's crazy. I also played V2R on PC. So why did they need to do this? They didn't. They really didn't. But is it good? It depends on what you like about Neptunia, I suppose. To its credit, it is a lot different from V2, for better or for worse. Almost everything is completely revamped, so you'll at least be getting a unique experience. V2 met the challenge of making a next-gen game beautifully. It immediately stands out the moment you open it. The graphics are nicer than any Neptunia game before it, in my opinion at least. The UI is completely overhauled from past mainline entries, the combat has some fresh new ideas, and the game opens with a cutscene that basically just tells you, hey, this is serious. We are doing something here. It's a great hook to the story. After the Rebirth games, which largely just used the template of Victory and standardized a ton of stuff across all 3 games, V2 is an incredibly welcome breath of fresh air. It introduced new mechanics, variations of old ones, and overall just feels like a Neptunia game while simultaneously doing its own thing entirely. V2R overhauls the combat and UI yet again from V2, adds a ton of stuff that V2 didn't have, removes a ton of stuff that V2 did have, and just overall feels like its own game, mechanically speaking, rather than a remake of an old one. That's how off the rails it goes. Again, for better or for worse. As per usual, I'll be covering both versions in depth, starting with the original, then going into the remake. So, without further ado, welcome, finally, to Neptunia IV. So here's the thing, Neptunia 1, Neptune, IF, and Compa. The other goddesses become more prominent just towards the end. In Rebirth 1, it was mainly all of them together. Neptunia 2, the candidates IF and Compa. The goddesses came in just more towards the end. Neptunia 3, Neptune, Nepgear, alternate dimension goddesses, and alternate dimension IF and Compa. The candidates were just more prominent towards the end. Do you see the pattern here? All great games, all great casts, questionably, but the overall cast is so big, mainly thanks to Mark II, whoops, that they never really made a story that fit everyone in properly. Now, I know that's not quite fair to say. I mean, Neptunia I was literally Neptunia I. They had just invented the characters and told the story they wanted to tell with them. And Mark II, again, wanted to focus on this new group of characters, and so of course it's going to be mainly centered around them. But the point is that they've mainly focused on a smaller subset of this core cast for most of the time. That even applies to the spin-offs. Neptunia IV, however, truly feels like an everyone is here kind of story, and it does that by focusing on a smaller subset of the core cast. The game is split into 3 big arcs, which all focus on a few characters at a time, until eventually everything comes together. Nobody truly feels left out or unimportant here. Everyone gets their time to shine, both in their own focused arcs and in the way they come to feel like a part of the larger group. Even the new characters are no exception. The narrative jumps around from place to place, from cast to cast, but it's all part of one cohesive story, which is super unique for Neptunia, and they pull it off extremely well. I also need to acknowledge that the characterization of everyone is so back in business. I talked about this in the Action Unleashed video as well, where they actually start treating Nepgear and Neptune like normal again, but that game is in the super dimension. This one is back in the proper hyper dimension, and again, a direct sequel to Victory and Mark II. And despite being labeled as a direct follow-up to Victory, the Ultra Dimension goddesses are nowhere to be seen. Instead, we just have the hyper dimension ones back. Neptune herself even defaults back to her old parka outfit just to demonstrate that she's no longer in her evil era. She's characterized more similarly to how she was in Neptunia 1 and 2, ditzy, lazy, carefree, and blunt, but still with plenty of love in her heart and willing to support her friends no matter what. A subtle but important distinction from her uncaring and rude nature in Victory. Nepgear, similarly, is treated with respect. She's no longer the butt of jokes about being boring. They just lean more into her nice side, as well as her nerdy about hardware and robot side, which is both extremely charming and genuinely makes her helpful in the plot itself. The 3 major arcs of the story are all presented as games of their own, even starting with a cool title screen with the name of the arc, as well as their own opening movies? So this game actually has like 4 different openings, including the main one for the game itself. V2 really comes out the gate with its presentation, and it's awesome. The first arc is all about the zero dimension, because of course a mainline Neptunia at this point can't not play around with different dimensions, but the hyperdimension itself still gets a lot of love and focus of its own too, so it's good. Neptune and Nepgear are, predictably, being reprimanded by Histoire for being lazy, yada yada, standard Neptunia stuff. But there's more of a reason this time. Game industry is entering a CPU shift period, which is when citizens get to start worshipping whichever CPU they want, so naturally there are those who start intentionally smearing the reputations of other CPUs just so theirs comes out on top. Basically, all the goddesses are busy playing PR, which, of course, is not Neptune's strong suit. But while out on a stroll, Neptune comes across a strange game console. I really wonder what this one is based on. She excitedly shows it to Nepgear when she gets back to the Basilicom, wondering if she can figure out how to fix it. She does, but as soon as she turns the console on, they both get sucked in and transported to hell. This is the Zero Dimension, a post-apocalyptic wasteland with scarcely any life left in it. As they frantically try to figure out where they are and how to get home, they run into literally the only other human left in existence in this dimension. Maybe one of the best characters of all time, Uzume Teneboshi. Rare to have a Neptunia character with a last name. She explains that she's the CPU of this nation, but she lost her memories from before the destruction, so she can't actually recall how it got to be this way. She just knows a big contributing factor is this colossal being that's still roaming the lands, and she's been trying to defeat it to save what little of the nation is left and all the harmless monsters who've moved there for safety. She's extremely stubborn and reluctant to let innocent people like Neptune and Nepgear get involved, but given that they're stuck there anyway, she agrees to work with them until they can find a way home. Uzume naturally has a bubbly, cutesy personality, but having to fight for survival in such tough conditions for so long has hardened her and given her a complex of needing to appear cool and reliable. She acts tough, and she is, but on the inside she's just as laid back and fun-loving as Neptune and Nepgear. Her CPU form is Orange Heart, and that's where her true personality really shines, acting unabashedly childlike. Uzume can do no wrong, she's amazing. And thankfully she hasn't been completely alone. She has Umio, her partner in crime, her ride or die, a loyal, handsome sounding knight in shining armor. Yeah, he's a fish. It's played for laughs, but come on, this guy is awesome. He's just loyal and gives Uzume the kind of reliability and emotional support she needs. He actually reminds me a lot of Histwire, which might sound like a weird comparison, but it's in the sense that he's always grounded and level-headed, almost like a guardian figure. There's even a funny scene where he gets to communicate with Histwire, and the others complain that they sound like parents talking about their children. Oh yeah, and adult Neptune! She kinda just crash lands out of nowhere into the zero dimension, classic Neptune move. This Neptune was actually foreshadowed at the very end of Neptunia Victory in a post-credits stinger. Yeah, did you forget this was supposed to be a follow-up to that game? The story scenario is wildly different and seemingly disconnected, but a lot of important Neptunia 3 elements, particularly regarding the Ultra Dimension, actually come up here. V2 is great about doing its own thing while still creating high-concept through lines of its predecessor's plot points. Adult Neptune is the Ultra Dimension Neptune, the one who never became a CPU since Plutia became one in her stead. This version of Neptune doesn't rule Planeptune, she just likes to collect bugs. That's it, she's a bug enthusiast. She travels from dimension to dimension in search of ultra rare bugs to add to her collection. And you know what, if that isn't the most Neptune thing of all time, I don't know what is. Also, she dual wields swords, so that automatically classifies her as a badass. The second major arc of V2 places us back in the hyperdimension, where game industry as we know it goes all wacko, and the whole continent essentially gets reorganized, quote unquote. Everyone forgets who the CPUs are, and instead it's as if this new group has always been ruling the nations, with all the citizens worshipping them. This group is Gold Third, yet more new major characters. Don't worry, one of the first lines of dialogue after they're introduced is the obvious joke. This arc is split into 4 routes, making it extremely fragmented, and the routes each follow one of the 4 goddesses as they travel back to their own nations and try to work out what's going on. There's also this villain group called Aphimax running around with their own agenda, made up of new and old faces alike, very akin to the 7 sages from Victory. Each route in this arc focuses on a different aspect of what this villain group is doing, as well as the Gold Third of the nation. The Gold Third members are basically rivals, or at the very least counterparts to the CPUs, even having their very own powered up forms called Gold Forms. They don't actually do too much in terms of being relevant to the overarching plot, which, combined with its fragmented nature, can make this arc feel a little tedious and weak, but they at least have really nice arcs of their own in their respective routes, which still makes me like them a lot as characters. And also, come on, their gold forms are sick as hell. They don't completely transform their bodies like the CPUs, they just get varying degrees of accessories and extra weaponry, which makes their designs more unique and distinct from the CPUs. And of course, because this is Neptunia, Gold Third are all based on real video game companies, kind of being pseudo-makers similar to the Generals and Hyperdevotion, except these are based on specifically third-party developers rather than specific games or genres, all sporting more references than anyone could ever count. And it's literally hitting me as I'm reading this why they might be called Gold Third. Originally, I was going to just skim the Neptunia wiki to point out some of these references for each member, but I would feel like a certified fraud doing that, since while it's really cool knowing the references, I'm not gonna pretend like the orb from Onimusha actually means anything to me. I'm sorry, Onimusha fans, I'm sure the game is amazing, I just haven't played it. I can at least pog on Seashaw's Mega Man skill animation. That made me remember though that one of my good friends actually made an entire video about literally this exact thing, so just go watch that, it's really good, I'll have it linked in the description. Neptunia has always gone absolutely ballistic in cramming in as many video game references as humanly possible everywhere it can, and these characters are no exception. From their skill names and animations, to their character designs, to their fighting styles, to their voice lines, there are so many of these companies' games that are pulled from here. Bisha represents Bandai Namco, and since Bandai owns the toy rights to various tokusatsu franchises, there are references to some of those thrown in there too. I'm a big fan of Kamen Rider W, and check this out.
Despair is your finish line.
Keisha represents Konami, so of course there are some cardboard box scenes, and she literally has the Konami code on the soles of her shoes. C-Sha is Capcom, and S-Sha is an interesting one. If I told you she has an alternate personality called E-Sha, then could you guess what she is? Yeah, this is Square and Enix, which is cute. Arc 3, I won't say much about given that it's the last third of the game, so you know, spoilers, but everything finally comes together in a really satisfying way. This is definitely among the best stories in Neptunia for me, with significantly more new characters than other mainline games tended to have, and they're all great. I don't think that there's a single character here that I just feel lukewarm about. It is a solid cast that somehow manages to include all the important Neptunia characters without feeling too bloated. Now, I do have to acknowledge that that is just from a purely narrative standpoint. Gameplay and mechanics wise, this story structure presents its fair share of issues for me. Maybe playing so many Neptunia games before this one, i.e. all of them, backfired on me a bit because I was expecting a lot of its systems to be more fleshed out than they actually are, at least for most of the game. See, the story jumping around so much just means you are constantly losing access to old areas and resources, which means you can't play around with things like item development a whole bunch. I'm so used to stopping and grinding for materials or money to craft or buy stronger equipment and consumables, but V2 does not expect you to do that. For one, the game is extremely easy, I'd just be remiss not to mention that. Probably the easiest mainline game so far, which is really saying something, but that's not the main point. It was jarring seeing the shop and development sections be so barren and stagnant for the grand majority of the game, instead of new things being added frequently like in the other games. That, combined with only having a few dungeons available at a time, therefore severely limiting access to materials, made these systems feel a lot more unnecessary than they've ever felt. But I did realize eventually that that's by design. You do get to a point in the game, very late into it, where the entire world opens up and you have total freedom and access to everything so you can play around to your heart's content. But even then, there's not much more that can be added to the shops or development. It's mostly just new accessories, costumes, etc. The Zero Dimension arc, which is the first one, for the most part is one coherent linear story. But given that it's the beginning of the game, it feels more like a tutorial section where new things are constantly being taught to you. So then in Arc 2, you'd expect to be able to play around with them more. In fact, Arc 2 immediately opens up a whole host of even more new systems in and of itself. Scouts, investment, the guild for side quests, etc. But since Arc 2 then gets split up into 4 separate routes, instead of actually fleshing out these new systems plus the existing ones, you're instead constantly starting over with your resources. So again, the game isn't actually allowing or expecting you to use them a bunch yet. A mechanic that's more minor but really exemplifies this is the ability for characters put in the back to share some of their stats with the characters in the front, offensively or defensively. That's pretty neat. The problem is that you literally never have more than 4 party members until near the end of Arc 2, so you get these partnering mechanics introduced to you that you're not even going to be able to utilize for another 30 hours. It wants you to just use the limited items you have at your disposal to progress, but for me that made it feel like I was just along for the ride as opposed to actually playing the game. And even then, when everything opens up, the game is obsessed with splitting up your party, so you scarcely ever even have everyone at once. The story itself is still fantastic, but something about the game mechanically just left me unsatisfied for most of its runtime. That's mostly just regarding the outside non-combat systems though. The combat itself is really solid and brings some unique ideas to the table compared to past entries. It uses the combo system from Victory and Rebirth as its basis. For normal attacks, you can string a combo together with different moves that fall into different categories. There's no guard meter or guard breaking in this game though, so instead of rush, power, and break moves, you instead have rush, power, and standard moves. In past mainlines, break moves would specialize in guard damage, so they replace those with more average in-between moves that don't really have a specialty. Rush, as per usual, specializes in multi-hit moves, power specializes in raw damage, and standard is there. You learn new skills, which includes combo moves, by leveling up. Where this differs from the combo system in past games is in basically every other aspect. You used to be able to assign any move to any slot in its category, in a way where you could even have duplicate moves, but you were restricted by an arbitrary point system called combo points, where each move used a certain amount and you could only assign moves that use the character's max combo points capacity. Now, in V2, your limits for the combo moves arise more naturally. There are no combo points stopping you, but not every slot is fair game anymore. The types and amounts of slots you have available to put moves into is entirely determined by your weapon. One weapon might be able to hold 3 standard moves, 2 power moves, and 1 rush move, and then you could get a new weapon and now only be able to use 3 rush moves. So you have to determine if the stat benefit you get from a new weapon is worth the switch up in move types you have access to. Not only that, but duplicate moves are no longer allowed. Each move can only be put into 1 slot. So if you only have 2 power moves so far, but your weapon can hold 3, you can still only use 2. I have mixed feelings on this. Sometimes it's really annoying to get a new weapon just for it to have combo slots you don't like, but it also does add more strategizing and makes you think about your priorities. Also, the EXE drive is in this game, and it's charged per hit just like in most previous games, so having a bunch of rush attacks instead of power attacks is still useful in that way. Combo moves also have a new attribute added to them that makes them even more versatile no matter which slot types you have available, and that's combo traits. Most combo attacks have a combo trait, but definitely not all, and combo traits guarantee the attack to be critical if certain conditions are fulfilled. For example, an attack might be critical if all the previous attacks were of the power type, or if none of the previous attacks were of the power type. Some combo traits depend on previous attacks using or not using their own combo traits. So number of hits, raw power, and combo traits are all things you can strategize your combos with, which is really cool. SP works traditionally, and of course you can use your attacks to charge up the EXE drive. It's extremely similar to past games, where each hit you land on enemies charges up the gauge. It's a lot easier to charge compared to past games, which also kinda makes up for the combo move shenanigans, so you can use EXE skills a lot more. It's split into separate smaller bars where you can use those bars for super powerful EXE skills. You get more bars to use as you progress through the game, where it eventually caps out at 4. Unlike other games, the EXE drive doesn't persist between battles. It always starts at 0 in every encounter, incentivizing you to use EXE skills more often because there's literally no reason not to if it makes the fight easier for you. You're going to lose it anyway after the battle, which I think is a really nice change. You learn EXE skills, like other skills, by leveling up. You also use the EXE drive to activate HDD mode, which costs 1 bar of EXE to trigger. HDD mode is the same as in all the other games, boosts all of your stats, and in some cases gives you new skills to use. The same goes for gold form in the case of gold 3rd. I'd also be remiss not to at least mention that the main 4 goddesses may or may not also obtain a form higher than the normal HDD called their next form, which is even stronger than HDD and is absolutely rad. Formation skills and coupling skills are also still in this game, which are EXE skills that can only be used with specific party members who are on the battlefield with you in the case of formation skills, or partnered with a specific character in the back in the case of coupling skills. The way you actually use formation skills is really interesting though. You have to physically surround the enemy with the characters involved in the skill. You'll see a line connecting all the characters forming a closed space, and once you have the EXE for it, triggering the formation skill will hit every enemy contained in that space, so the enemies you can hit with it depend on how effectively you can place your characters. This works for 4-way, 3-way, and even 2-way formation skills, where the area of effect for that last one is literally just the straight line between the 2 characters. It's a really sick way to use formation skills, and again, since EXE doesn't carry between battles, you're incentivized to really play around with it to optimally get through encounters. They introduce a little thing called parts breaking, where some enemies or bosses will have something on them that you can damage separately by hitting them at the right angle. They usually provide extra defense for the enemy, so damaging parts until they break will leave them more vulnerable. It's a relatively minor thing that I don't think changes that much about any given battle, besides one standout boss that I can think of, but it's an interesting idea. Astonishingly, this is the first game in the entire series that lets you use skills outside of battle, which allows you to heal yourself and cure status ailments while in dungeons. About time. Character challenges are still present in this game, and they're just as useless and inconsequential as usual. Small permanent stat boosts for meeting certain basic requirements like performing a certain amount of symbol attacks, using a certain amount of support skills, etc. The most impactful one I noticed was one that gives you plus 300 extra SP for performing 200 combo traits, which is kinda nutty. Also, Lily ranks. Can't have Neptunia without those. They're a little easier to raise in this game than other main lines, since every battle raises the Lily ranks of everyone in the front lines with each other, plus each member's partner in the back. Also, there are separate things you can do in battle to help raise Lily ranks on their own. For example, using support skills will raise the Lily ranks of the person who used the skill and who they used it on. Using formation skills will raise it with everyone involved in the skill, and switching partners in battle will raise the Lily rank of those partners. Using items also counts as using support skills, so you can get 2 characters to keep using items and or skills on each other in a battle to raise them relatively quickly. Like usual with Lily ranks, each character has certain passive buffs they give to the character in the front when they're placed in the back as their partner, and more are unlocked the higher their Lily rank is. But there's also that new mechanic I mentioned earlier, where the character in the back can actually share 10% of their defensive or offensive stats with the person in the front. In many ways, this game feels like it's trying to take its gameplay more seriously, which is great, but that also includes a lot of relatively minor changes that, to me, have the vibe of the game wanting to establish itself as a real RPG, quote-unquote. Things like status effects remaining on your characters after a battle, having no XP share, not healing on level up, and limiting the amount of each item you can have from the normal original 99 down to 30. None of this was the case in other mainline games, at least not altogether. I'm not saying I'm opposed to these changes at all, except maybe the no XP share, that one kinda sucks. And just an interesting observation, I mean, this is Neptunia we're talking about, it never had that vibe to me, which is why I think it stands out so much here. It feels almost out of place in a way that's hard to describe. It's very indicative of what their philosophy was when designing V2. In fact, not only do you not heal on level up, you don't even heal when you exit the dungeon. Welcome to the world map. This game is slightly less menu-based than the Rebirth games, just a smidge. By virtue of having a world map you have to actually physically travel across. You're still basically just selecting dungeons and cities with your cursor, but every point of interest is connected by nodes, which you have to travel across when you select it. Only traveling to a designated city center will heal you. I think it's actually neat to have such a limited way to heal outside of skills and items. It helps to add more tension to traversing dungeons and makes it more engaging. But the thing about the world map is that it has random encounters. So it's entirely possible to exit a dungeon needing to heal and still get wrecked by a random map encounter. Now, you'll quickly outlevel the enemies that actually appear depending on where on the map you are, so that's not a huge issue, but just having that as a possibility, and it did even happen to me once, is just a bridge too far. Also, the existence of having random encounters on the map at all just makes traveling around in general super tedious. This is historically a series, mostly, with dungeons full of overworld enemies that are designed to be able to go into whenever you want and grind whatever you want at your own pace, so it doesn't even make sense to have that and random encounters at the same time. Just on every single level, world map random encounters are an awful idea. But while the world map might be soul-sucking, the dungeons themselves are an absolute step up from any of the previous games. They feel like they were actually designed with care instead of whatever the hell they used to be. There are still some returning dungeons from previous games, like the Cyberscape that's been assaulting our eyes all the way since Rebirth 1, I exaggerate, but there are a lot of new ones too. The environments are more interesting, the layouts are a bit more varied, and they make more use out of things like warp points and elevation. Like, the very first dungeon has you climbing up building debris. That's already more interesting than the series has cared to make them up to this point. Dungeons also have destructible objects in this game, some of which of course will be blocking certain areas of dungeons. But you need certain key items first before you can destroy them. One of them you get automatically early in the game from a boss fight, and it allows you to destroy some objects, but then there are stronger objects that you need to develop another item for in order to destroy them. Destructible objects can drop credits or materials for item development, some of which are unique to these destructibles, but even that still doesn't let you access every area of every dungeon, because Jumping Star is back. There's a new item type called flag items in this game that are functionally passive abilities that you can just turn on and off at any given time, which is neat. During the story, you'll automatically get Jumping Star, which is now a flag item, and it allows you to jump higher in dungeons and access areas and treasures that were previously too high up to reach. This is also something that annoyed me about the story structure, because the individual goddess routes in Arc 2 start with 0 of the items and resources you had before when Neptune was in the party, so you can't even destroy objects anymore because you don't have that key item until the party all joins together again. Outside of combat, there are, naturally, many facilities and systems you can utilize in the city centers. Of course, there's the shop, where you can buy a host of consumables, weapons, accessories, etc. But the game takes advantage of there being so many different city centers that you can access this stuff from, by making certain items exclusive to specific cities. Planeptune, for example, might have a host of accessories and weapons for Neptune and Nepgear that you can only get in the Planeptune city center. These items are highlighted purple and marked limited, which might sound like they time out, but in reality that just means they're exclusive to that shop. Then there's item development. Plans in regards to item development just means the item's recipe, so you have to obtain the plan before you can craft it here. Item development allows you to craft, or develop, items using special materials. Materials are gotten from enemy drops, where every enemy drops unique materials, scouting, or from destructible objects. There's actually a neat item in this game that you can buy from the shop called the Observation Scope, which you can use on enemies in battle to see what items they drop, as well as pretty much all of their other parameters like stats and levels. Generally, each type of enemy has one material that all variations of that type drop, as well as another specific material that only that unique variation drops. But you'll also notice another category here, stolen as opposed to dropped. See, some characters actually have special stealing skills that have a chance to nick one of the materials under this header from an enemy before you defeat it, which can make material grinding a little bit faster. Of course, with the way this game is structured, good luck actually having access to the right monsters or the couple of characters who have steal abilities for most of the game. You'll notice some items that are consistently present in the stolen category: CPU chips and game industry chocolate. These items just heal one character's HP by 15% in battle, nothing to write home about. But if you do use them, you'll notice that they also give you special key items. CPU chips give you trading cards, and Game Industry Chocolate gives you figures. These are just cute little collectibles. The cards are just of Neptunia characters, even ones that aren't in V2, and the figures are parodies of other games and characters. You can even open them straight from the item screen to speed things up if you just want the collectibles, because that's really what they're for. It's a minor thing that I really appreciate for adding some charm and character to the game. Also, enemy parts that you can break have their own drops, and they're all for chips and chocolate. When you actually develop an item, you obtain one of that item, and if it has the shopping cart icon, it'll also be added to the shop so you can buy it with credits instead of materials from then on. But that's not the case for all development items. Plans for items are usually gotten from automatic story content, but you can also get them from certain Coliseum fights or through investment. Investment is a brand new mechanic to this game. Essentially, you can blow credits to upgrade each city center in 3 different categories: commerce, industry, and public relations. Commerce adds items to the shop, and industry gives you development plans. These are where the bulk of limited items come from, both for the shop and in development. Commerce mostly just gives you outfits in the shop, but industry gives plans for a bunch of exclusive weapons, so that can be nice. Public relations is all over the place. There are special scenes that each level of PR gives you, and the items you get from it are super varied. Sometimes you get new processor sets for HDD, new scouts, new discs, or anything in between. Raising the 0 dimension city center to max PR, which is level 10, gives you a processor set that can be sold for an obscene amount of credits, setting you up for life in this game. Just a little tip for you. 2 PR scenes in every city center also give you special NEP station events, carrying on the tradition from Neptunia III. One is Wallet Crusher NEP, where you'll be offered a mystery box with something random inside for just under 5,000 credits, and the other is a Million NEP quiz, where you'll be asked 3 Neptunia related trivia questions, with an item reward for each correct answer. If you answer every question correct in every Million NEP quiz, you get 1 million credits. Disk development is still here and still remains basically unchanged. You can buy most idea chips in the shop up to level 3, with higher level ones only coming from elsewhere like quests or Coliseum rewards. Each disk has a different holding capacity for types and level of idea chips, and the idea chips give you different passive abilities, so when you place that disk on your character, they'll get those abilities. The biggest change is that you don't lose your idea chips when you reformat a disk anymore, which means resetting it to get all your chips off. Before, this would mean getting rid of the chips, but now you're free to swap out chips on any disk anytime you like and not have to worry about losing anything, which is awesome. And yes, godly game disks and sucky game disks also still exist. You can still take side quests through the guild as usual, and quest ranks return from victory. This is a system where each quest has a graded difficulty rank from E to S, which has always been the case in the games, but it hasn't mattered literally at all, except for games with quest ranks. You have an overall quest rank, and you can only access quests equal to or lower than your current quest rank. You can increase your quest rank by completing specific promotion quests that upgrade your rank when you complete them. It's much easier to raise in V2 because promotion quests are just tied to story progression. They open up near the end of Arc 2. Just like in Victory, quest ranks also affect Coliseum fights, because those too have ranks. So you must be quest rank S to access the S rank Coliseum fights. The Coliseum isn't unlocked until super late into the game, once you start Arc 3, but otherwise it's the same as it's always been. A list of no-risk bonus fights where if you lose, you just spawn back on the map. Fights give you item, credit, and XP rewards. Scouting from Victory also comes back. You can send out scouts to dungeons who will passively search them in the background and bring back rewards. You can only deploy and bring back scouts in the same dimension you're currently in. They can bring back credits, unique materials for development like herbs, and even other scouts. So the more you deploy scouts, the more scouts you'll have. Each scout has a not so helpful list of stats that are letter graded. I think these just refer to how likely it is they'll find specific things, but you can deploy as many scouts to a singular dungeon as you like at once, so I don't think these matter much. Unfortunately, you have to wait in real time for scouts to come back. It's not like in Victory where time, quote unquote, was just going in and out of dungeons. And no, you can't cheese it with changing your system time, at least not on PC. Trust me, I tried. In fact, fast forwarding my system time made the game freeze for a little while, and turning it backwards to the proper time again made it crash entirely. It must really screw with whatever else the game is using to keep track of time. The time it takes to scout depends on the dungeon, but they're almost all in the 7 to 15 minute range. Almost. Scouts can also change some attributes of the dungeon itself, including your gains in it. See, along with their vague stats, they also have actual helpful, unique passive effects that they'll put onto the dungeon they're scouting, so you can go into that dungeon and take advantage of them. This can be extra XP or credits earned, increased item drop rates, etc. You can level up scouts with a special item called an energy mate, which unfortunately isn't readily available anywhere outside of one-time drops like dungeon treasures, so there is a very limited supply to go around. Leveling up scouts increases those letter rank stats, but more importantly, they also make their dungeon passive more potent, or can even add an entirely new one. One notable passive is the change enemy effect. Nearly every dungeon actually has 2 entire sets of enemies it can contain. There's the default set, and then a group of enemies that only appear if a scout is present with the change enemy effect. Enemies locked behind change enemy are generally significantly stronger than the default ones. There are also mini-boss-like special enemies in dungeons akin to the strong, tough, and risky foes from past mainline games. But they're not tied to change enemy. They're actually just yet another separate thing that scouts can find in dungeons by chance, and from then on that enemy will stay in the dungeon. They don't drop special materials though, so they're really only good for completing quests that specifically require killing them, notably the promotion quests. Strong enemies though isn't it for the more unconventional things scouts can find. They can also discover extra dungeons. Yes, just like in Victory, there are secret hidden dungeons that scouts have a chance of finding. They can only find ones in the same dimension they're scouting in. Almost every dungeon, hidden and non-hidden alike, also has at least one hidden treasure in it. But instead of the treasure-seeking mechanic of past games or hidden blocks in Rebirth 3's case, in V2 it's up to scouts to find those as well. They're a little more interactive in this one though, because scouts can't actually find the treasure itself. They find the requirements for unlocking it. Every hidden treasure has a specific requirement that you must fulfill in the dungeon to make it appear, at which point its location will be marked with a special symbol on the map, but that requirement isn't known to you until a scout uncovers it. And once they do that, they're unable to find any more until you fulfill that requirement. Requirements range from trivial ones like win 5 battles without healing and kill a certain amount of this enemy, to more tedious ones like defeat every enemy in the dungeon and get a certain amount of symbol attacks in a row without attracting the enemy's attention, which is deceptively difficult. Your streak is nullified if an enemy notices you in any way in the overworld, or you attack and don't hit the enemy. Yeah, overworld whiffs will send your account back to 0. There's a lot of hidden treasure to get, and you gotta manually fulfill the requirements for every single one. The extra dungeons themselves are about what you'd expect, more of the same, just with different enemy types and strengths. There are a few that really stand out though, 2 of which come in the form of everybody's favorite, Neplunker. The normal rules of gameplay do not apply here. The Neplunker dungeons play more like a platformer, where you have lives and you have to avoid a whole host of obstacles. If you hit any of them, you lose a life and restart from the beginning of the floor. You also lose a life from fall damage, and I'm talking like the smallest amount of fall damage ever. You can survive very short drops if you walk off ledges without jumping, but if you jump, landing on any ground lower than the one you jumped from will kill you instantly. If you run out of lives, I mean, you'd probably just expect to start from the beginning of the dungeon again. But no, you get an actual real game over booted all the way back to the title screen and all. The privilege of not getting a real game over is locked to New Game Plus, where you get a flag item that just boots you back to the map instead, so definitely save before going in here. There's one Neplunker in the Hyper Dimension, which is a pretty easygoing time, and then there's another in the Zero Dimension, which is designed to bust your balls. Now, from what I've gathered, this is an unpopular opinion, but I'm gonna speak my truth. I like these dungeons. Normally, when you try to shove in any kind of gameplay element in an RPG overworld that isn't walk forward, it just doesn't really work out. But the fact that these are relegated to completely optional side areas make them unintrusive, and even then, they do not overstay their welcome. They're super short, and so I found it satisfying to learn the layouts, where all the obstacles are, and how to get around them. It has a very arcadey feel to it in that way. It makes clever use of your fall damage limitations with the platforming, often trying to bait you into jumping somewhere that'll kill you when really it requires some specific trick to get through that you have to figure out. It's a nice break from the main gameplay loop, and it really tickled my brain. That's just from a gameplay perspective though. I will admit that it's kinda BS to have to complete the dungeons like this anytime you need to access a deeper part of it for any reason like to collect treasures. And yes, the hidden treasures for both Neplunker dungeons spawn at the very end of the dungeon. There's one other dungeon I want to call out for being unique, we'll say. The fearsome Senmu Labyrinth. See, Neplunker I can appreciate. Senmu Labyrinth I could execute behind a shed and feel no remorse. This dungeon, true to its name, is a big ol' maze. There's a whopping 4 full floors, with a 5th just housing the quote-unquote boss monster. And as you can see, or not see, your visibility is absolutely nuked, making it so much more difficult to analyze your surroundings and recognize where you are. But it's Neptunia, surely you can just use the mini-map. Okay, now we're in hell. Yes, a giant maze with no minimap and extremely limited visibility. And to top it all off, this dungeon has the strongest enemies in the game. It is, for all intents and purposes, the endgame dungeon, especially with enemy change. It also has the most enemies within it out of any dungeon, that being an entire 45 encounters. I say it like this because not one, but 2 of its hidden treasure requirements are to kill every enemy in the dungeon. So not only are you stumbling around the entire dungeon killing all these enemies, likely using a map you found online because dear god you need it, but that also includes the boss enemy I mentioned, which isn't just any normal enemy, it literally is a boss. A tough level 99 one at that. But hey, great to see them still using level 99 Shiva from the early days of the original HDN. This is literally the only instance of 2 hidden treasures having the same requirement in the same dungeon, because screw you, I guess. Getting to extra dungeons requires use of a new system called route building. Yeah, it's not enough for the scout to just find a dungeon, because there won't be nodes connecting the dungeon to the rest of the map for you to cross. Basically, you just have to pay credits to actually expand the world map and create routes to new locations. It's required a handful of times in the main story, but mainly you'll be using it to access extra dungeons. You can only build routes from a city center that represents the area the dungeon is in, so a dungeon in Leanbox has to build its route from Leanbox's city center, for example. And of course, we can't have a mainline Neptunia without shares. Shares are wacko in V2. Just about the only thing that's still the same about them is the way they're obtained, which is just by completing guild quests and Coliseum fights. Also, investing in public relations raises shares for that nation. But even then, they don't operate on an overall fixed percentage anymore. Up until now, all shares made up an overall 100% of total shares to go around, so when one nation's shares increased, another had to decrease by the same amount. Not in V2. They all operate independently now. You know how in the very first original Neptunia game, shares could go down if a goddess died in battle? V2 took some notes, and now that applies to even just getting hit. Every time a goddess or candidate gets hit in battle, they lose a little bit of their respective nation's shares. They're not permanently gone like in HDN, that would be obscene, but it does mean that the more you use them in battle, the lower their shares will get. Shares don't actually do much mechanically except make your characters a bit stronger, but they do play a part in which ending you get, because of course they do. Despite this game's fixation on segmenting your experience between different scenarios and party members, you can, at the very least, be at ease in post-game, because thankfully the game continues after the ending, where you're free to do whatever you want for as long as you want. Oh, sorry, after one of the endings. This game has 3 different endings, and only the true ending gives you this freedom. You'll hit a point very near the end of the game where 4 optional events appear on the map, all requiring route building to access. If you don't view all of these before entering the next story required dungeon, you'll be locked into the bad ending. Not just completing the dungeon, entering the dungeon. Had to find that one out the hard way. If you do view them in a timely fashion though, you'll be on the normal ending by default if you haven't fulfilled the other requirements for the true ending. Said requirements for the true ending are scattered all over the place and are hard to keep track of, but it boils down to this. In Arc 1, the Zero Dimension, view all of the side events. That means the optional conversations you can see in the conversation list in the city centers. This does require you to keep traveling back to the city center to check for them, like all the time. But a helpful option is in the gallery, where you can view a big list of all the events, and the side events are all under the sub-event category. If one is available that you haven't seen yet, it'll show up here without a clear marker next to it, so it'll stand out. This is more useful for later in the game, where you have more cities available so you don't have to travel to every single one just to see if events are available. In Arc 1, there are only a few sub-events besides the automatic NEP stations, but you have to see them all. Also, there's a part of Arc 1 where you visit the hyperdimension with Neptune. There's a sub-event here too with Histoire that you have to see. Arc 2 is where it gets more complicated. In Noir, Blanc, and Vert's routes, you have to get their shares to 40%, which will unlock a special sub-event where they have a dream. You can do that by completing guild quests and raising public relations through investment. Neptune's route is more in-depth. There are more sub-events with Histoire to see here, as well as certain guild quests you must complete. First, some practice, Histy's Extermination Request 1 and Histy's Extermination Request 2. All of these will unlock more sub-events to see, and it's all required for the true ending. Last but not least, while on Neptune's route, raising the Neptune's shares to 60% after beating the boss of the Sakura Tree Row dungeon will unlock one more sub-event with Histoire. And those are all the extra requirements. In Arc 3, there's nothing further to do other than the usual of seeing the aforementioned 4 obvious events so you can avoid the bad ending. Once all of this is done, the game will continue past where the normal ending usually ends for a couple more dungeons, you'll get the true ending, and you'll be dumped into postgame. In postgame, you can start a New Game Plus anytime by viewing a special Histoire sub-event in Neptune, or you'll be automatically prompted if you didn't get the true ending. You can choose what to carry over in New Game Plus, including separate options for scouts, items, credits, and characters. However, an annoying amount doesn't carry over at all. All the investment levels of all the nations, and all the extra dungeons you found will all reset, as well as all the hidden treasures. I do still recommend doing the true ending on a New Game Plus though, because you get some extra little goodies in New Game Plus, mostly in the form of extra flag items. You get one that lets you jump even higher in dungeons, one that lets you run faster in dungeons, and one that completely eliminates random encounters on the world map, which is huge. So if you get the true ending on a New Game Plus, you can stay in postgame with all of these benefits. The DLC includes a bunch of extra costumes and OP accessories and items like usual, along with additional scouts. But there's some actual cool stuff too. The level cap raising packs come back, which each increase your level cap by 300 for a total of 900 extra levels, creating a new overall level cap of 999. Those ones are free and baked into the PC version already, you just have to enable them in the main menu like with all the DLC. There are also extra Coliseum fights to use those new levels with, that are above level 99 and go all the way up to level 999. V2 really stumbles with it though, because unlike the other games with this kind of DLC, it does not add any new extra enemies or dungeons outside of those Coliseum fights, which are hardly ever useful for grinding anyway because of their difficulty. So it is unbelievably tedious to grind to the DLC max level. The most XP you can reliably and quickly get is from one special enemy in Senmu Labyrinth, only available with the change enemy effect. It's on floor 4 and is the big metal dogu. This thing gives a whopping 10 million experience, and of course can give even more with XP raising scout effects. It's only level 8, but runs away very easily. There's an item you can use called the Forbidden Twig, which automatically respawns enemies when you use it, so you don't have to wait a while for them to respawn automatically. This is enough to get to level 99 in just a few battles, but level 999? Absolutely forget it. The scaling of XP needed to reach the next level is wicked high. Even right after level 99, you'll only be gaining about 1 level per big metal dogu kill, and it only keeps getting slower and slower from there. There are also 4 extra playable characters. 2 of them are immediately available and usable upon enabling the DLC, Nepgia and Umio. Nepgia is a total joke character, just being a clone of Nepgear but with this infamous expression permanently on her face. Umio is probably also meant to be a joke character, but let's not insult my boy like that. He's a worthy member of the team. The other 2 characters are actually brand new Maker characters, and boy did I have a hell of a time with these ones. They're not available right away, they have to be manually picked up at certain points during the main story, and if you miss them, you miss them. Their sub-events are always last in the conversation list, making them even more hidden since you have to scroll over to find them, which is another reason why the gallery is so nice. One is God Eater, who you have to pick up during Noir's route in Arc 2, and the other is Nitro Plus, who you have to pick up during Vert's route in Arc 2. That's not all there is to them though, they each get their own entire line of sub-events throughout the story after that, so you get to see more interactions with them in the main cast, as well as their own little story arcs, which is super cool. Some of those events, however, are exclusive to post-game, meaning you have to have also gotten the true ending. I say I had a hell of a time with this because I actually never enabled the DLC until after my true end run. I usually play the base game without DLC, then enable it afterwards for post-game and grinding stuff just to check it out and use it. I should have enabled the DLC after my first normal ending run, but for some reason I didn't. I wanted to see these events and characters, so that's fine. I had a save from my true end run on Noir's route, the latest save I had that would still let me pick up the characters, so I just reloaded that save and started from there. But that was before I realized that some events were exclusive to the true end post-game, so I wasn't worried about meeting the requirements, so I had to reload that save again once I found that out, only to get all the way to the end, properly getting the true ending again and all, but still without any more of the events popping up. As it turns out, there is a bug where none of the DLC character events after Arc 2 show up if your New Game Plus has characters carried over, meaning you have to start a New Game Plus and disable carrying over characters, which just meant I had to start a fresh New Game Plus anyway after all of that. So Just be warned. I'd imagine this bug is just a PC version thing, but I don't know for sure. Hey, it was worth it though. I absolutely love these characters, especially Nitro Plus, although her storyline made me have to lay eyes on this cursed thing. I would be remiss not to mention the forbidden, sinister third DLC maker character here too. See, back in ye olden days, there were 3 DLC makers in this game, with the third being Million Arthur, who fell victim to the age-old licensing issue of these kinds of things and was delisted in 2020. She was relisted later only in Japan, before getting delisted again there too. As far as I know, her in-game events work the same way as the other makers, being first available in Neptune's route in Arc 2. You can still watch her event scenes up on YouTube from before she was delisted at least, and I've even heard there are mods out there that put her back in. The achievements can be a bit grindy in this one, chief among them being to find every single hidden treasure in every single dungeon. So yes, you have to manually wait out the scouting time it takes to find them, then manually fulfill every single hidden treasure requirement. Once you have enough scouts, you can start deploying groups of them to multiple dungeons at a time and reliably uncover a few hidden treasure requirements at once. But remember, not until you fulfill the requirements for the previous hidden treasure they found in a dungeon. There's one for getting any character to level 99, which you'll kinda need to do anyway because the hidden treasure requirements for Senmu Labyrinth will involve defeating the level 99 Shiva boss. So again, big metal dogu go brr. Thankfully, you don't have to max out every Lily rank in this game, you just have to max out all the Lily ranks for one character. You can get Lily rank up level 5 chips to put on discs to make it faster, and the fastest way to raise them is to just have the 2 characters you want to raise Lily ranks with in your party and no one else, get into an enemy encounter, kill all the enemies except for one, and just spam support skills or items on each other until their Lily rank is maxed out. Rinse and repeat for every character. There's an achievement for maxing out all the investment categories for every nation, which will cost a pretty penny, so my advice is to max out the public relations in the 0 dimension first to get the Delphinus processor units, and selling those will make money a complete non-issue for the rest of your life in this game. Still be careful though. Every nation's public relations levels will contain a Million EP quiz, and there's also an achievement for getting every Million EP answer correct, so definitely be following a guide for those answers lest you have to do a whole new game plus for it, or just save scum it. There's an achievement for developing 100 unique items with item development, which sounds very daunting, but fear not, as usual, accessories and outfits come in clutch. You see, many plans for the extra outfits you unlock by investing in industry for each nation only require as ingredients the base outfits you can buy at the shop, plus one other pigment ingredient. For the pigments, there's a plan you can get from a Colosseum fight called Lots of Dogus that unlocks the pigments, and once you craft them once, you can just buy them from the shop from there on out. So then it's just a matter of buying out the pigments and outfits, which will then let you craft a ton of new outfits for item development. Easy peasy. So that's it, right? Right? Now, there is one more, okay, technically 2 more, achievements of note. You must collect every single trading card and every single figure from the CPU chips and game industry chocolates. The figures are easy because there's only 16 of them and you have an equal chance of getting any one of them, and the process is entirely save scummable, so you can save before opening, and if you get a repeat, you can reload the save and get something different. The real hellish endeavor is in the trading cards from the chips. There are 33 of them, but much like real trading card packs, they come in different rarities. Most things I've read online about going through this process mention the time it takes to grind for all the chips required, but that's silly when you can just save scum them. Which may sound tedious to do for every card opening, but some of these cards get so rare that you will have to open an obscene amount of chips regardless, so I promise you, you don't want to be adding the time of chip grinding on top of that. You'll still have to grind for a few since you can only hold 30 at a time, and there are 33 cards, but that's it. You can easily get chips and chocolate from enemies that have parts you can break. Any dungeon with Chocopi enemies is good, they usually always have breakable parts. There are a total of 17 common cards, 12 rare cards, and 4 super rare cards. You can get repeats, so it's entirely up to the heart of the cards. Even the rares are pretty damn rare, and with there being 12 of them, it's going to take a while to get all of them. And then on top of that, the super rare cards, even though there are only 4 of them, are indeed super rare. You are going to easily spend hours and hours opening CPU chips for cards. I don't know why they thought this was a good idea. I mean, it's really cool as a mechanic, but requiring you to get all of them for an achievement is an absolute headache. And of course the first 3 SRs I ever got were all the same card. Just my luck. And that concludes all the noteworthy achievements in the game. Overall, Megadimension Neptunia V2 is a fantastic game. It's definitely one of my favorite entries, even with my gripes about it holding out on you gameplay-wise. The story is great, I love the new characters, especially Uzume. All of the characters, both new and returning, are well written, which was definitely needed for a mainline after whatever they were doing in 3. And the gameplay introduces a whole host of new and refreshing twists on the Neptunia formula, not to mention the noticeable upgrades in graphics and dungeon designs. It's no wonder this game is held in such high regard. But as we all know, that is not where the story of V2 ends, because they said, okay, but what if we immediately did that again? Introducing Megadimension Neptunia V2R, the remake that came out only 2 years after what was already a big next-gen entry. Maybe the most baffling Neptunia game in terms of why do you exist. Could you say that about a lot of the spin-offs too? Yeah, but in my eyes, they can make spin-offs all day. Let the devs go crazy. I love seeing what wacky stuff they come up with in those and where their creativity leads them. They're different and interesting. But V2R? I mean, you could make that, but why? Okay, you just went ahead and did it anyway. Okay. But I'd be lying if I said it didn't justify its existence, at least from the standpoint of providing a different experience, because they really do overhaul nearly everything here. Now, at least in the Neptunia spheres I've been in and the opinions that I've seen from other fans, it seems like in general, people who like V2 hate V2R. And yes, while it's very easy to make fun of it on the grounds that it was unnecessary in the first place, the fact remains that it was made, and I think completely dismissing it is unfair given the wholly unique experience it provides. I'll get into all the minutiae of mechanical differences, but first there are some glaring issues I want to get out of the way. For the large group of people that seem to not like V2R, it's not just because it's not V2, there are some specific decisions it makes that put people off, and yeah, I also feel that these are not for the better. As you can expect from a Neptunia remake by now, the story is largely unchanged, but there is still a big caveat with that in V2R. V2R only has one ending, the true ending. For whatever reason, they completely cut out the normal and bad endings. All those requirements you needed to meet in V2 to unlock the necessary sub-events aren't needed anymore. The sub-events pop up automatically, and no matter what you do, whether you view them or not, you're going to get the true ending because that's the only route in the game. V2R also dumbs things down from V2 in pretty major ways. V2 was already extremely easy, but V2R completely gets rid of whatever tension it still managed to have by making you heal to full automatically after every battle. No more needing to exit the dungeon and travel to a city center to heal anymore. If you can reliably clear one single encounter in a dungeon, then you have no chance of getting a game over. And it's not like they adjust the difficulty to make individual encounters harder. That would have been a good way to make this work, but they still feel completely like normal, so combat just feels more mindless. On top of that, V2 actually didn't have you level up very quickly. Level progression was slow. A big chunk of the game is split into those goddess routes in Arc 2, where you start and end at roughly the same levels in each one, and the game overall loves to have party members leave and come back later in the story at a predetermined level, so you don't really ever level up that much at once in any part of the game. Even by the end of the game, you can clear the main story at only level 50 or 60. Of course, this is all still true in V2R, but I noticed that you level up a lot quicker. That's less of an actual issue, I just thought it was curious. It really feels like this game is trying to streamline out anything V2 did that made it different. However, by far the most egregious thing to me personally is that V2R does not allow for manual saves at all, ever. The entire game runs on autosaves. V2 let you have like 50 save files, and you could save at any time on the map or at dungeon save points. But V2R completely removes the save points and relegates the entire game to one save file. The game autosaves pretty much everything you do as soon as you do it. If you develop an item in the overworld, reload your save instantly and it will still have happened, buckaroo. No save scumming or keeping backup saves allowed here. Actual hell for me. Look at how paranoid I usually am about saving. Combat-wise though, this also makes the game even easier because it autosaves after every encounter, meaning even if you do get a game over, you basically lose zero progress. There are no consequences whatsoever. It's these kinds of decisions, along with the questionable existence of a V2 remake in the first place, that absolutely tanks its reputation. And yeah, I can't blame anyone for being put off by these things. But hey, one decision I do agree with is that they removed random encounters entirely from the world map. Good riddance. Also, you can dash in dungeons. I don't know why, but you move extremely slowly by default in dungeons and can sprint with a stamina meter. I prefer just having the one middle ground running speed like V2 did it, but sure, why not? I don't know how much more naturally I can bring that up, so I'm sticking it here. There's one more thing this game is very well known for. Obviously, V2R can be read as V2 Remake, I mean, what else would the R be for? But Neptunia wouldn't pass up the opportunity for a double meaning. And as it happens, V2R kinda also sounds like VR. This is the big marketing point of V2R, added cutscenes that are compatible with VR. See, the framing of this game is actually pretty cool. Since it's a remake of a game that already happened, it's presented to you as if you're just viewing the records of history. You, as the player, have your own room in VR space, and Histwire tells you that you're free to watch what happened again at your own leisure, aka play the story. This is the main menu, where the story is but one of your selections. Another selection is VR events. There are some VR scenes that automatically play during the story that bring you back to this room, but most of them are completely removed from the story, just being added here as you progress the main game, and available to view whenever you choose to. I think I can safely say that this is the third Neptunia game with a self-insert character, because the VR events all take place in your room, the only VR space in the game, and all of these scenes involve characters breaking the fourth wall to come and talk to you. Yes, you, the player. Real life is a different dimension they can just travel to. They're relatively short scenes where the characters just kinda talk at you for a while, since you obviously can't actually say anything. They can be neat for exploring more of their characters, like Blonde talking more about the book she's writing for that book writing contest that's mentioned briefly in the main story. But of course, because they need that player fulfillment aspect, they also warm up to you a lot and come to care about you a ton for not really any reason. While these scenes are VR compatible, they're not only viewable in VR. You can just play them on normal desktop too, and that's what I did since I didn't feel like getting out my whole VR headset. So I can't verify what playing them in VR is actually like, but you can absolutely tell they were designed for VR first and foremost. You can't freely move around, you can just move your head from side to side or back and forth, the latter of which on desktop results in extremely jerky motions as you move your stick. There's some interactivity in the form of yes-no prompts. Sometimes the character will ask you a question and you can respond yes or no by physically shaking or nodding your head. There are also certain points in the space that you can look towards at certain times just to make something happen during conversation, and that's really it. You can also decorate your VR room. Viewing VR scenes unlocks different decorations for your room. I definitely don't think they're as expansive as they could have been. A bunch of spots in here only have one alternate decoration to put there, and it's almost always Neptune themed. The spots with the most decorations and variety are the places where you can put plushies, and there are plushies of most of the main cast members, the 4 goddesses, the 4 candidates, IF, Kampa, and Uzume. They're adorable. There are these little figure boxes which only have Neptune, Noir, and Blackheart variants, which just seems really odd. You'd think they'd have more of these. But that's kind of the theme with all of these decorations. And for whatever reason, you can't just free roam your room to see the decorations. The only context you'll ever see any of it in is in the limited view you get in the decoration setup itself and in the VR scenes. For being the big new addition to the game, the VR stuff doesn't really have much to it. But don't get me wrong, it's still a neat addition. Getting back to the main game proper though, I keep talking about how the combat and systems are so different, so let's get into it. Despite its obvious drawbacks, V2R genuinely brings a lot of cool ideas to the table. While the combat in the original V2 takes the Victory and Rebirth combo system as its basis and builds off that, V2R uses Mark II as its basis. Yeah, talk about a throwback. Every character can still execute their multi-hit combo, but the restrictions on it are determined by a little thing called AP. Characters charge a certain amount of AP every turn, and that determines which attacks they can fire off. Each attack in the combo costs a certain amount of AP to use. The amount of AP a character charges is based on a different stat called ACP, and each character has a maximum amount of AP they can store at once, which is their normal AP stat. SP works the same way. In Mark II, you have to charge it by landing hits on enemies, but V2R changes it so that it charges automatically just like AP, with mirroring stats to match. SCP for how much they charge each turn, and SP for their max holding capacity. The EXE drive is totally gone. SP is used even for your character's super moves and formation and coupling skills. In the case of those, every character must have the required AP and SP stored up, and it gets consumed for all characters involved. AP doesn't just apply to normal combo moves, it applies to everything. In the spirit of any other previous game in the series with AP, a character can keep taking actions until they run out of AP, so you're not restricted to just one action anymore. This can be anything from your normal combo moves to SP skills to using items. SP skills will still have their normal SP cost, but also an AP cost. As long as you have AP to use, you can do whatever you want however many times you want in one turn until you manually end it. Which you of course do by just pressing the end turn button, right? Wrong. You do that also by using a skill. A special type of skill called a defense skill. Everyone has a default one that costs nothing, which is just defending like normal. But this is one of the coolest things about V2R to me. There are unconventional types of skills you can learn. In fact, the whole skill system is unconventional. Characters don't learn skills automatically by leveling up, they have to manually learn them with credits. But each skill still has a minimum level requirement that has to be met as well. This applies to your normal affairs like combo skills and SP skills, but then there are other skill categories that let you do a lot of other cool things, like the aforementioned defense skills. So instead of defending when you end your turn, you can learn and use other defense skills instead, such as one that costs some AP but charges your SP more than usual, or ones that don't increase your defense at all but instead increase your agility, making you more likely to completely dodge but at the risk of being hit for full damage. Defense skills also consist of counter skills, which are so fun. Once a character learns certain SP skills, they may also be able to learn a corresponding counter skill, where if they get hit with a certain type of attack from the enemy, such as physical, magic, short range, or long range, they'll completely counter with an SP skill instead, damaging the enemy and taking no damage for themselves. They don't get the defense enhancement that defending normally would though, so if they don't counter, they again risk getting hit for full damage instead. Counter skills are amazing because they can apply to enemy AoE skills too, so one unit countering an enemy can protect not only themselves, but also everyone else who would have gotten hit with that attack too. They're also good for conserving resources, because counter skills will cost less to use than the SP skill itself, so you can use a counter skill instead to bank on maybe still damaging the enemy with that skill for a lower cost. There are also Lily rank skills. This basically serves as those passives that characters in the back can give to characters in the front based on their Lily rank with each other. But instead of more passives being added with higher Lily ranks, each character just has one special effect they give that just gets more potent the higher the Lily rank is. Each character has to manually learn Lily rank skills for every other character in order to actually receive their passives, which is weird to explain, but for example, if you want a character like Nepgear to, say, receive Keishaw's Lily rank passive, you have to learn the Lily rank skill for Keishaw on Nepgear, and only then, if Nepgear's in the front and Keishaw's in the back, will Nepgear get Keishaw's passive. Each character also has their own unique Lily rank passive that they can receive no matter who the character in the back is. Then there's item skills. I haven't heard that phrase in years. Item skills let you use your normal consumable items in conjunction with certain materials for different effects and also maybe a different AP cost. So you could just use a healing item for its normal effect, or there could be a different variation of its effect that you can use instead that also costs some materials alongside it. You can use them anytime you want, it's not like HDN's item skill system. Each character has slightly different ones they have access to, which of course still have to be manually learned with credits, but they're much cheaper than other skills and most, if not all, have a minimum level of just one. All of this makes skills more dynamic. I absolutely love the idea of these non-traditional skill types, and I think they were implemented really well. It expands your options and gives you more to think about and play around with. I love winning by doing absolutely nothing. When a character levels up, they gain a small amount of BP. BP is bonus points, and they're just points you can literally allocate to your stats directly to make the character stronger. Stats are weird in this game because along with your normal ones, there are also overall stats like power and accuracy, which also affect your capabilities along with the ways your normal stats like strength and agility do. Dumping BP into a stat may change multiple of those overarching stats. I don't know exactly how it works, but every character has an accuracy balance with two stats, which I think it just means which stats should be increased with BP together in order to not tank accuracy. Because you'll notice that if you just dump BP into one stat, not your agility but your overall accuracy will also most likely change. Sometimes upward, which is great, but sometimes downward. And you can increase another stat with BP to get it back up. The single biggest other change aside from combat is how equipment works. There is a heavy focus on equipment when it comes to getting stronger, much more so than usual. The shop has an even smaller selection of weapons and armor than in base V2, because equipment doesn't actually have fixed stats anymore. Instead, you can upgrade them to make them stronger. The level of an equipment piece is referred to as its rank. So the idea is that you get stronger versions of the same equipment as you progress through the game, and that is determined by your technology level. During the main story, your technology level automatically increases based on progression, but in post-game you unlock a system to manually increase it further, which we'll get into later. It's your technology level that determines the ranks that items from the shop come in, or items you develop. The max rank you can upgrade your item to further is also determined by your technology level, usually just being a few ranks higher than it. So if your technology level is 35, any item you buy or develop with item development will come at rank 35. The strength of equipment isn't even mainly denoted by the stats it directly increases, but by a completely separate value just labeled power, which is one of those overarching stats, which I assume is just general damage output. However, equipment also comes with a ton of additional attributes they've never had before. Basically, any aspect of your stats or resistances can be affected by these attributes. This is where you can get direct stat increases, which will be more potent with higher ranks. It can also give you more ACP, or increase your physical damage output specifically, decrease magic damage taken, decrease damage from certain elements, you name it. So it can be worth using equipment that technically has weaker stats if it has some other attributes you really like on it. ACP boosts specifically are extremely good. Also, outfits and accessories now have meaningful stats, unlike previous games where they were really just mostly for looks. So unfortunately, it's harder to customize your outfit just for the sake of it. Once you have the plans for those outfits and accessories though, you can still develop the ones you like with item development that are going to be up to snuff thanks to how the technology level works, which is nice. The wild thing about developing equipment in this game, however, is that the attributes are all completely randomized, like all those extra effects an equipment piece can give you. In the shop, they're fixed, but again, you don't really have much of a selection there. So it's extremely difficult to get specific attributes. You just kinda have to find and or craft a ton of equipment and just see what you get. There are a lot of craftable equipment pieces, but with the way the technology level works and attributes being randomized, there doesn't seem like much of a point to craft any one piece over another besides the materials it requires or how it looks, since they're all going to come at the same rank, which means roughly the same strength. The RNG doesn't stop there though, because equipment also comes in different rarities. Every piece of equipment that drops from enemies or that you can develop has a chance at coming in a rare, super rare, or ultra rare variant, as opposed to its normal common one, each being stronger than the last would be with all else equal. Development itself has gone through a major overhaul, both in how it works mechanically and in the kinds of materials you can find and use. Mechanically, items you develop do not get added to the shop. Ever. So you have to develop every single piece. Development isn't its own facility anymore, in fact hardly anything is. A lot of things are just done straight from your inventory now, and development is no exception. Every plan you get is stored in their own special category in your inventory, and manually selecting them gets you access to the items pertaining to that plan. In a way, I kinda like this, since before it was really difficult to tell which items came with which plans, since there were often singular plans that unlocked a host of items at once for development. Although the original V2 made that easier by just telling you the plan associated with it when you hovered over the item. The drawback to the system in V2R though is development items not being split into the standard categories. Instead of being able to see every accessory in one place, for example, you have to find the specific plan that accessory is in instead. And there are a lot of plans and accessories. In basically every other aspect though, development is streamlined in ways I really appreciate. The main thing is that oftentimes a material required to develop an item is also itself an item you can develop, but instead of needing to scroll all the way back to the original plan for that item to see how to develop it, you can just view the materials required and even develop it right then and there. So it allows you to develop the ingredients as well as the main item itself on the same screen. Some items even have multiple ways to develop them, and so in that case you can switch between all the available recipes too. V2R goes all in on development and materials. They're needed for a lot more than an original V2. For example, investment now requires special materials that you need to develop, and there are different ones for each investment category. They mainly require ores and unit parts. Unit parts are also used for lots of other things like processor plans, so they're one of the more important materials and have 4 different recipes available to make them with. Likewise, ranking up equipment requires special strengthening materials, and there are different materials for each type of equipment, from weapons to armor to outfits to accessories. The sheer amount of raw materials needed to progress in this game, mainly thanks to the item ranking system, makes scouts more important than ever. Scouts have also been reworked from how they were in V2 a little bit. Unfortunately, they don't give any passive effects to the dungeons they're in anymore, but they also don't have those weird nebulous stats either. Instead, their utility entirely comes from their unique specialties. Every scout has their own designated specialty, not ones that affect dungeons, but ones that determine what they can actually find from scouting a dungeon. In Victory and V2, any scout could find anything from a dungeon, whether that's discovering a strong enemy, uncovering hidden treasure, or what have you. But in V2R, those spoils are specific to individual scouts. Leveling up scouts with energy mates adds one more specialty to it. Scouts can be leveled up to 5, upon which they'll have 5 specialties. There's no enemy change in this game. All enemies in dungeons that were unique to enemy change are just kind of non-existent now. Nearly everything else is still here though, including finding stronger enemies and finding hidden treasure requirements. It's just that a scout has to have that specific ability to find them. You can also now only deploy one scout to each dungeon, but some scouts have the ability to increase that number for a dungeon. So you have to be very deliberate in which scouts you're sending to which dungeons based on what they can do and find there. One thing I really appreciate, especially given the heavier emphasis on materials in this game, is that you can even be deliberate about which materials you get from dungeons. Passively raking in materials with scouts is paramount for development, since you will need a lot of raw materials from dungeons like ores. Each dungeon has a set of items a scout can find in it that you can see when you hover over a dungeon on the map. But you'll also see that the list is split into 3 sections called grades. A scout must have the ability that lets them gather items in that specific grade to get those, but even then, when you go to deploy a scout in a dungeon, they'll all have different items within that grade that they'll gather. So if you want a specific material, you just kinda have to take each scout with that ability and see what pops up until you find one that'll gather the material you want. You can see what their spoils will be and the percent chance they actually get them in the scout screen when you're about to deploy them to a dungeon. There's also the ability to gather enemy drop items, which means that the scout will gather items that normally drop from enemies within the dungeon rather than the normal graded ones. So even things like beast hides and plates, which are some of the more prevalent materials you'll need that normally just come from defeating enemies, are gatherable by scouts with this ability. Energy mates are now available to buy in the shop in this one, with enough commerce investment in the 0 dimension, thankfully. And even after a scout is max level, you can spend them to lower their current scouting time by 1 minute. So if you really want to grind out a certain material fast, you can spam energy mates on a scout to have it keep instantly returning with stuff, which is a really cool way to get more use out of energy mates even after your scouts are leveled. Also, in the original V2, you could only manage scouts at a city center, but in V2R you can do it anytime you want, so you can constantly be deploying scouts and collecting their spoils. The combat, equipment, and scouts are definitely the biggest changes in V2R, but they're not the only ones, of course. The guild is back to having no quest rank, and honestly, good riddance. There's also a new type of side quest you can take on at the guild called bounties. Bounties are basically just your traditional hunts, strong enemies that you can go find and defeat for really good rewards. The more dungeons you unlock, the more bounties you'll unlock that take place there. Bounties give a ton of credits as rewards, as well as drop a ton of random equipment and materials upon being defeated, but they can only be taken on once, no repeats with these. But don't worry, there's another type of bounty that you can repeat called high-risk bounties, but before that, we need to talk about rank challenges. V2R adds some post-game content in the form of rank challenges and high-risk bounties. Rank challenges are how you can raise your technology level past where the main story leaves it off at, which is 35. Every dungeon has its own unique rank challenge, but you must fulfill the hidden treasure requirements for the dungeon first to make it appear. Not every dungeon actually has a rank challenge, but most do. So unfortunately in this game too, you need to find and fulfill every single hidden treasure requirement. Although it's a little less tedious this time around, because each dungeon actually only has 1 hidden treasure requirement, as opposed to the original V2 where they could have up to 3. There can still be multiple hidden treasures though, but they'll all show up at once you hit the requirement. Rank challenges are an entirely separate mode you can play the dungeon in, so once you've unlocked a dungeon's rank challenge, you have to choose from then on whether you want to go into the rank challenge version or the normal version. The goal of a rank challenge is simply to defeat the special boss of the dungeon, that's it. Killing normal enemies first though can weaken it in some ways, like slightly decreasing its health or certain resistances. Also, the game doesn't autosave during rank challenges, so there's actually some slight consequence to dying for once. The strength of every enemy in the dungeon, including the boss itself of course, is determined by you. You set the rank you want the dungeon to be on, which is basically its strength. Clearing a rank challenge on a rank higher than your current technology level will raise your technology level to that rank, which is how you can keep increasing it and keep getting stronger gear. Annoyingly though, the rank you can set is capped. It starts at 40, which is also the minimum any dungeon can be set to, and from there the cap only raises by a few ranks at a time, and that cap applies to each individual dungeon, so even if you've completed one and raised the cap for it, that won't raise it for all. Thankfully though, there's another weird rank challenge option you unlock for each dungeon after you've completed its normal rank challenge once. Online rank challenges. The only difference with this is that the rank cap is universal based on the rank that any player has completed the dungeon on before. So as you can imagine, at this point that just means an uncapped rank. Cool. Anyway, rank challenge bosses are pretty strong, but they drop a wild amount of equipment and items. And the really neat thing about that is that each one focuses on dropping equipment for one specific party member, which you can see on the map when you hover over it. So if you don't want to grind for materials to keep developing equipment or even ranking it up for a specific character, you can go into an online rank challenge set at whatever rank you want the boss to drop equipment at for one that drops equipment for the character in question. Especially because that boatload of equipment has a chance to be of higher rarity, which developing for just isn't worth due to the material cost. Then there are the high risk bounties. I have to talk about rank challenges first because these are the same as normal bounties, but only appear in the rank challenge versions of their dungeon, which also means their strength is affected by the rank you set. So really, these bounties can be as high risk or low risk as you want. High-risk bounties are redoable and can give even more credits than the normal ones, so they are the way to grind for credits in post-game. Yeah, there's no Delphinus processor cheese in this one anymore. Ranks have an absolutely absurd ultimate hard cap, so there's basically no end to how strong you can get if you want to put the time into it, which I can certainly appreciate. In fact, when it comes to leveling characters, you don't even get any stat increases from them past level 99. Post-game strength from there on out relies solely on strengthening equipment, although you also still keep getting BP as well. The ultimate level cap for characters is 999, just like V2 with its DLC, but in V2R it's baked in. In fact, the only DLC you have to buy separately in this game is just various extra costumes and equipment and such, no actual meaningful content, which normally would be great since that means it's all baked into the game by default, which, you know, should include DLC content from V2, right? Yeah, another unfortunate cut that V2R makes compared to V2, it has none of the DLC content. No Nepkia and Numio, no Nitro Plus or God Eater or Million Arthur, which is so unfortunate. No new DLC characters of its own to speak of either, just a whole lot of nothing. The achievements for this game aren't terrible, it just requires a lot of dungeon grinding, because most of them hinge on completing all the rank challenges and all the bounties, including the high-risk ones. So yes, if you want all the achievements, I really wasn't kidding, you need to find every dungeon's hidden treasure, because that's how you unlock the rank challenges for each dungeon. There are some hidden high-risk bounties to look out for this. Some don't show up until you've completed the rank challenges on certain dungeons at rank 42 or higher for some reason. So you need to clear those at the initial max rank of 40 first, before being able to clear it again at a higher rank to unlock those bounties. The dungeons in question are 1st Gen CPU Sanctuary, Mario Land, Player 2 Park, Sakura Tree Row, Reload Grassland, Uncharted Canyon, and Delusion Neptune. Once you've done that, and of course found all the hidden dungeons in the game in the first place, you should have the full list of high-risk bounties available to you. There are a lot of achievements for defeating specific ones, as well as for defeating all of them in general. Some of them are strangely vague, like 800 Evil Gods actually just refers to the God of Woe high-risk bounty, and Ancient Dragon, even though there are multiple enemies and bosses that go by that name in this game, just refers to the normal rank challenge boss of Ariel Plateau. The other notable achievements are ones that play around with the ultra rare items. That's right, it's time for an RNG fest, baby! There's an achievement for simply getting an ultra rare item out of development. There's one for equipping an ultra rare version of every equipment piece on one character, that being a weapon, armor, outfit, and accessory, and then there's one for having a full set of ultra rare processor units on one character at once. Now, ultra-rare equipment is indeed ultra-rare, so it may sound like this requires an unholy amount of material grinding, and normally, yes, it would, because the godforsaken saving system of this game normally makes save scumming these impossible. However, there is one place that is actually free from those shackles. Remember that the game doesn't autosave in rank challenges, so if you hoard a bunch of materials with scouts and then go into a rank challenge dungeon, you're completely free to blow all of it in hopes for an ultra rare item, and if you don't get it, reloading the save will take you back outside to the map with all of your materials again. This is how you can save scum in V2R. So for processors, they mainly require unit parts, which are most efficiently created with orichalcum ore, so you can get a bunch of that and keep trying to develop processor parts for a character. Once you get an ultra rare, you can leave the rank challenge with an eject button so the game auto-saves over itself, grind for more materials if you need to, rinse and repeat. I only developed a few at a time before resetting to limit the amount of material grinding. You do not have to get every trading card and or figure in this game from the chocolates and chips. Thank God. And so that is V2R. As you can see, wildly different from V2. It cuts a significant amount of content like endings and DLC, which really sucks, and I'm not a fan of the lower stakes difficulty either, but even then, I still really enjoyed it overall. It totally does its own thing and is really unique, not just in comparison to V2, but even in comparison to the entire series up to this point. We have never seen an equipment system that resembles anything like this before, and even combat, while largely built on Mark II's combat, still takes a lot of liberties. The VR stuff is kinda whatever, it's neat but not much of a factor at all in how I personally feel about the game. Even if you've played V2 and like it, I think V2R is still worth checking out. Neptunia IV overall is a big step up from the previous mainline games, in my opinion. You can just tell how much they cared about the game they were making here. It's probably my favorite one so far, to be honest, but it's also the last mainline game for a very long time. And just like I've been doing so far, I'm playing every entry in order, spin-offs included, and so for a while after this, we will be in spin-off hell. I say it like that, but it's not a bad thing. I think the spin-offs are really interesting, and they at least guarantee that each one will be super different, whether it's for better or for worse. I'm personally really interested to see what they all hold, which is why I'm doing all this in the first place. So if you want to stick with me and see me cover more Nep, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, all that good YouTube stuff. I've been Mags, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.